Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw us some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall, and I am being slowly driven mad. The chair that I sit on to record and work in, so the chair that I spend
a lot of time.
On average 8 hours a day on, which is fucked up to think about.
Yes.
Is starting to squeak more and more. And it is slowly driving me to the point of madness. So if I break at any time in this episode and just start raving as if I've been detached from reality, that's why.
I will assume it's either that something has gone down with that situation, or you have received an unbearable UFO hum inside your brain.
How?
That's tormenting you.
Did you see the fucking, I think it was like a Reddit post that in like a citation subreddit about how do I cite something I learned from a dream that's been going around, you know?
No, I haven't seen this.
So someone asked like the official like MLA citation subreddit how to cite information sent to them in a dream. And now I'm gonna one up that and ask how do I cite information channeled to me from aliens?
It's a good question, one that I don't think we're any closer to answering. I
think honestly that's holding us back from a lot more scholarly papers on the subject of alien visitation and contact.
It's true, and I wish that Ed Walters was around to, maybe try and break new grounds with regards to alien channeling and citation of that information. I don't think he's dead. I just don't think he's in the public eye.
He just isn't actively pursuing the agenda at the moment. And I think that would be a good move.
Now, just to be clear, this is part 3 of our discussion of Ed Walters and the Gulf Breeze UFO sightings. We're focused here on Ed Walters' perspective because I was going through his book on the subject. And, there's some other stuff going on. But Ed Walters is like main guy, right? Like he's the main character in this story. Supposedly reluctant to be that main character, but here he is. So if you want to know what's gone on in the first 2 episodes, you're going to want to check out episodes 372 and 370, I think. We had to skip one.
If you open it, if the podcast opens and you hear Jules and my voice talking about The Exorcist, that's not the part you're looking for.
Yeah, and you can always check, the podcast titles. I know how people out there are just so eager to get to their they're just so eager to get to their content. They're just like pressing play as fast as they can. And I suggest, slow down, check out what the title says, and you'll know where you're supposed to be.
Look, I consume podcasts the way they're intended, where I wake up and I open Palm, slap a VHS tape of the podcast I'm about to listen to into my VCR player, and then I just start doing all the moves along with the podcast host.
Oh, okay. So you get your podcasts on VHS.
Yeah,
interesting.
That's where how they're supposed to. That you don't. What are you
proper
talking about?
format?
You don't do VHS tapes?
I've got sort of a Laserdisc collection. I've got Your Kickstarter Sucks episodes 1 through 20 on Laserdisc. Some of those are on Blu-ray. Like I've got what's the one where they eat a bunch of fast food? Doughboys. I've got like Doughboys, the complete collection on about 50 Blu-rays.
I stick with VHS or for the older podcasts like the foundational podcasts. You know, your Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, all those kinds of things. Started podcasting. I keep those on 1/4-inch tape. So,
okay. Wow.
That's so I bust out my reel to reel and get those really going.
Would it be appropriate to call you a bit of an audiophile, Niall? Would that be appropriate for me to say? Is that fair?
I do keep all of my digital media in FLAC files only, including video. So that I think you could say that.
Meanwhile, I'm over here listening to my fucking waves and shit and MP3s like a plebe.
Sorry, I started laughing because I literally have like my interface is fine. Like my interface is pretty good, but the speakers that I use to like do all this stuff, I chose for size, not like quality, because I'm mainly doing podcasting. So like if you were to show my actual setup to people and you just put the word audiophile near it, some people would get very mad at you.
Yeah.
But I do know, like I know stuff, but I'm not fussy about it.
You know it, but you don't necessarily live it 24/7.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
And I also yell at Jack White regularly for his like commitment to analog fetishism and how it has kind of impacted the music industry. So I guess there's a lot of things that people would probably yell at me for.
It's a valid criticism, but you got to get your shit together vis-a-vis your setup. That's all I'm saying. So wow.
What is Ed Walters' setup in terms of chronicling the world of his UFO encounter?
A lot of it's coming in through his mind psychically, I think, which is, that's sort of a unique position to be in. No, I mean, when we last left our boy Ed Walters and the Walters family, he's doing his thing where he's like running around the pool in his backyard trying to get photos of this UFO. There's aliens that are showing up. It's December, it's winter time, and aliens are showing up in his backyard and like spying on him, and all kinds of weird shit going on in his life. And where we're starting off this time is a number of days after the last encounter. The last one was on, I think, the 17th, and this next encounter begins on December 22nd.
We're getting into the holiday season now.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping there's a special encounter for December the 25th, maybe December the 24th if it's late at night, to really ring in the holiday season correctly.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like in the book, there's not a lot of discussion of the holiday season. I'm going to be real with you, but we can maybe infer.
He doesn't explain like their decoration situation.
No.
Or anything. You don't like know what his tree looks like. Oh,
no,
man.
it's mostly
really
focused on the alien.
Some more pages out of this book.
He definitely could have, but it's mostly about the alien thing. So yeah, it's December 22nd, and the MUFON investigation is officially beginning. Donald Ware from MUFON visits Ed to deliver the report that he's going to be delivering. Basically, he's going to show Ed this report that he's delivering to MUFON. And they've got the first 5 photos from Ed, because Ed is now officially like kind of like working with them. Even though he's trying to stay anonymous. He doesn't want his name attached to this story.
So he's dropped the Mr. X thing or whatever the fuck they had going on, or does he still?
Well,
do that
he's still. It's less that he is still standing by the Mr. X thing with the MUFON investigators, but now he has officially integrated himself as a witness of one of the witnesses. So like he's seen stuff, but he has not given MUFON the full details yet. He's just like, hey, I'll cooperate with you. MUFON shows up, they like take measurements of the property and all this other stuff. They've got photos where they're trying to match up where the other photos were taken and all that. And here is where Ed sort of notes that Ware, the investigator, gives him this like knowing look that suggested to Ed that these MUFON reps maybe have caught on that he was Mr. X, but they don't press Ed on this at all, and they eventually leave. So like you said, Christmas time's rapidly approaching, and the Walters family is, they're preparing by wrapping presents and the like, when Ed suddenly finds himself plagued by the humming, vibrating sound in his mind, which, as we've established, this usually signals the arrival of the UFO.
Yeah, it's like having a trick knee when storms are coming. You know, it's like my head just always goes to that fucking Far Side comic of like the two old men sitting on the front porch, and one of them has like a gnarly, like really exploded looking knee, and one has like an ear, like, and they both of them are like fighting over what weather is coming because it acts up under certain atmospheric conditions. Oh
yeah. Bones a creak, and I think the aliens are showing up here pretty soon. That's essentially how it works for Ed. So in a panic, while they're preparing for festivities, Ed just like runs to his office and hides in there and tries to wait out the humming. And it lasts for a few minutes, and he like often describes the physical and mental torture of it. I guess it's intense enough that like by the time it's over, Ed describes that he's been cold sweating through his clothes. And he caps this little anecdote about the humming by explaining that the very next day he would read about 9 photographs of a UFO submitted by a person calling themselves Believer Bill. And these photographs would end up in the newspaper. And essentially it's like, it's essentially him saying like, oh, that must have been why I felt the humming, at this time. So because the UFO was, I guess, spotted shockingly less than 2 blocks from the Walters house.
All right. I'll give him that. That's fine. Yeah. Okay.
So that next day, Ed decides that if he has one more encounter, he would finally, I guess, like break his silence and begin to really reveal himself as a UFO witness. Again, he's remaining anonymous to the public, but he's like rolling out more and more of his experiences to MUFON, because as of right now, MUFON like knows that he's in contact with this Mr. X guy who is the true witness, and Ed's just kind of like, working with them, but they don't have the full story yet.
Okay, so he's going to come out of the shadows and take away the like, oh, I'm just the intermediary. Like that's going to go out the window, and he's just going to be like, yes, I am an experiencer, and work with them directly.
Sort of. He's going to not break the Mr. X thing quite yet. He's going to basically be like, hey, I had a sighting. Now.
Oh, okay. He's going to add on to
his next sighting. He decides, I'm going to let them know that I saw this. And wouldn't you know, December 23rd, the very next day, around 5:55 a.m., it would happen again. So here's what he says went down. I had begun my morning routine, checking my building schedule on a house soon to be closed out. That done, I went to the kitchen. Walking past the half glass outside the door, I noticed leaves floating on the pool and stepped out to turn the pump filter on. There they were, 3 UFOs, each at the same level, hovering just over the tree line. I couldn't believe my eyes. A chill ran up my back, and I shook my shoulders in an effort to snap out of the stare that had me frozen in place. I looked at them, just sort of hanging there in the open. I decided they must have some kind of a screening cloaking device, or else a lot more people would have seen them. By the time I ran for my camera and returned to the backyard, one of the craft had lifted higher than the other 2. I took a photo. Immediately afterward, the highest craft turned brighter and winked out, followed by the other 2. It was almost as if they had waited for me to take their picture before they left. The picture I took of the 3 UFOs increased the pressure on me to do something. But what? I had already hinted to the MUFON investigators, Don Ware and Charles Flanagan, when they measured the side of the photos, that there was more happening than I was telling. So, it's through submitting these photos of the group of 3 UFOs that Ed would learn about Believer Bill. Ed had decided that for now he was not going to reveal his identity as Mr. X, just submit his own report of the latest sighting, and he only wanted to reveal himself to Dwayne Cook at the Sentinel and the representatives from MUFON. So now he is going to talk with the people at MUFON. And tell them that this is a sighting that he had, that these 3 UFOs are something that he specifically had seen. It's a weird moment for him because he gives them the photo, and Dwayne from the Sentinel's like, I want that for the newspaper. And then Don Ware wants the photo for the next issue of the MUFON Journal. And
it's clear that they want the story out there, but Ed feels kind of caught in the middle of this. And so what ends up happening is Dwayne makes copies in black and white for reprinting in newspapers of the photos, and then for which he's going to then forward to MUFON headquarters for publication in their journal. So they're going to run this shot and send a copy of the photo to MUFON.
So they both wanted it, and I thought that there was gonna be some like bidding war thing or something going on here, but they both wanted it, so they just copied the photo and sent it to both. Is that what happened here?
I guess so. It's like they're like, obviously MUFON wants hands on the photos.
Yeah.
Like Ed just kind of paints this picture of like, this evidence that he's turning up in these photos is so crazy that like everybody wants a piece. So they're just like, it's not that they're necessarily fighting over it. It's just like they're kind of trying to decide what's the best way to put the story out there. So of course, like MUFON wants it in their journal, but they also want to put it in the newspaper.
Gotcha. So it's more of like a perception thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that. Because like there are just times where it felt like it was going one way and instead went the other. Like there are times in these stories where you think you've leaned into, here's the trope of where it's going to get into the normal shit, where they start making money and they start like doing the rounds and everything. But no, they just were trying to put it out in a way that made people maybe believe it and take it seriously. And that makes sense.
Yeah. And we haven't quite gotten to the part where people are able to really start cashing in on this phenomenon. I guess you could count the newspaper as like cashing in because they're running so many stories on all the different sightings that are coming. But like the cashing in doesn't come in quite yet.
Okay.
So they end up sending, they basically, members of MUFON fly out to see a guy named Dr. Robert Nathan, who they in the book is referred to as an expert on photo analysis, working for Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is in Pasadena. And I guess this person is like an independent investigator. And so they give it to this guy to take a look at them for a while. And here is the description of the trip to meet this person from the investigators. Quote, on his first cursory examination of the Polaroids, Dr. Nathan was generally non-committal, except to say that if they were hoaxes, they were very good. Using their horizontal press camera, a giant version of what we have at the Sentinel, they took several shots of each Polaroid at various light intensities, apertures, and shutter speeds to bring out different features of the originals. They also shot the two 35mm prints sent in by an anonymous reader after we printed the Veterans Day photos on November 19th. All in all, Dr. Nathan was very cordial and did assure us that he believed ours was not the only planet inhabited by intelligent life, especially in view of the billions of individual stars and star systems in the universe. On the other hand, as we left his office, he cautioned us not to expect too much from him, as it was his objective to find the flaws in the photos that would suggest a hoax. As a result, the best we could expect to get from him would be an admission that he couldn't find any irregularities in the photographs.
Okay, so they're not like noticeably forged in any way. There's nothing that like stands out as making them obviously fake. Okay,
right.
Cool.
And then months later, and there's like a quote in the Orlando Sentinel, which basically is Dr. Robert Nathan saying like, I inspected the original photos. They were not double exposed. That's all I can really say. So that's you know, it's a far cry from saying that they are not faked, but it is interesting that they're not double exposed, because that is one of the, or at least according to this guy, they are not double exposed, because that is like the big, if you see these photos, one of the big explanations for what's going on with them is that they are double exposures. And that's
it's big in ghosts and like fairy photography and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Double exposure is how a lot of that shit's done.
And it's especially like, it's especially important in this case because the there is one photo in particular where like the UFO seems to be coming out from behind trees. And so they're like, well, you'd have to like have a bit more of an elaborate technical setup to double expose a photo like that.
Yeah, I can see that.
So that's why there's such an emphasis on the double exposure thing. This is not confirmation that they're legitimate, but this is at least supposedly an official person saying, well, they don't seem to be double exposed. So
that's one of the fun things that I think about when people talk about evidence and what it means and how it's used and everything. Like, the most you can learn from that photo is not that aliens are real. You can only learn that the photo is showing to you as whatever the camera captured, you know? Like, that's all you can actually gain knowledge-wise from a photo like that. Because once you get beyond, what the camera is capturing, then you can augment what that camera is seeing all you want. But so I just love, it's interesting to see people try to use like photos like this as concrete proof of anything but the fact that it captured whatever they were seeing. It's just always interesting to me how much people rely on this kind of stuff to try to prove their point,
Niall, it's ufology. The only kinds of things we're doing off of evidence are running fucking leaps across chasms, it's fully like any tiny little thing that you can stretch into seeming like a legitimizing, force in a UFO case. You're going to take it and you're going to run as far and as high as you fucking can with it.
Trust me, that kind of shit is some of my favorite stuff in the world. Like, that's why I got so into the fucking Face of Mars stuff and there's crystalline structures like the Watchmen structures on the moon and stuff, where it's just like, this stuff is just coming from people finding artifacts in photography and like blowing things up and fucking with all the settings.
Pareidolia gone wild. And
and it's all just like the brain playing tricks on you, trying to see something that's not there in like the imperfections of physical media. And it's kind of fascinating. So I'm for it. It's fun, but I don't take it too seriously.
So on December 24th, the Sentinel ran one of Ed's photos alongside one of the photos submitted by Believer Bill as a sort of comparison. And next to these photos, they included Believer Bill's letter to the editor, which says this: "Dear editor, well, here it is. I too have to join the believers because I have now seen a UFO, 3 of them, right there on the shoreline. I can't understand why nobody stopped as I did to watch them. I waved and pointed to everybody driving by, but nobody stopped. It was only about 5 or 5:30 p.m., just getting dark. I was heading east on shoreline, very close to where you can turn to the school. In the north, looked like over the high school, I saw 3 UFOs just over the line of sight of trees. I pulled over to the side of the road as other cars went by. I watched for a minute or so and remembered that the kids had left a toy camera, hot shot, on the back seat floor. I had no idea how many shots were left in it, if any. I even closed the camera with the pictures. It was better than nothing, and I got 9 pictures. I never could get all 3 UFOs in the same shot, but the first 3 photos are shots of each. As they hovered around, I could no longer tell which was which. They were white on the bottom when I first saw them, but as they came lower and I took the pictures, they became more orange. I started to run through the woods so I could get a closer shot, but as I did, and after shot number 9, all 3 of them began to glow bright white and disappeared straight up. There was no noise, no rockets blasting. They just went fast and were gone in maybe 2 seconds. If I remember right, the UFO in the paper last month looked like these. I'm not going to be hypnotized and all that crazy stuff, so here are the photos. The experts can claim what they want, claim they are trick photos, but I'd like to see somebody take a trick photo with this toy camera. I'll keep the negatives for my grandkids." As you can see, it got darker and darker as I took the pictures, but from the beginning to the end, it was maybe 8 to 10 minutes. Now, notably about this particular sighting, he talks about the high school, like they're over the high school in the north.
Okay.
This is something that I believe Ed Walters can see from, I think, like his backyard. He can see this school,
so
like
close.
Yeah. So this is why, like, when he finds out about the Believer Bill story, it's like corroborating the humming in his head because it's nearby.
Do we know anything about Believer Bill?
We do get 2 months later some extra details from Believer Bill writing in. But for now, not really. So Believer Bill adds this when he writes in again 2 months later. He says, "Sorry about taking so long, but I don't want to be involved. I thought I said the date I took the photos in my letter, but I guess I forgot. It was December 22nd, just before 5:30 p.m. I took them over to the mall for 1 hour service so I could see if the camera worked. I was disappointed when I saw the quality of the prints. The real thing was much clearer. I can't say exactly where I was standing while shooting the pictures. I was running around waving my arms trying to stop somebody to look. I was close to the oyster bar, but parked on the roadside closer to the school. I stuck them into the Sentinel mail slot at about 11 that same night." So we don't know a lot about Believer Bill. They do know the location that these photos were taken. Some of the more skeptical people wonder if Believer Bill might be Ed.
Yeah,
but we don't know. It's especially funny because, like, in the book, he's just like, oh, this specific date and time, I feel the hum in my head. And then this Believer Bill guy happens to, snap photos of UFOs like nearby my house that I just didn't notice that day.
Yeah, I keep trying to figure out where, like, when the grift is going to come in on this one, just because so far there isn't an obvious grift, like it there's nothing there. There's red flags, there's yellow flags, but there's nothing that is like, oh, there it is. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when we brought in another, like, Believer Bill is a bad fake name, but it is a believable bad fake name, but it also is one that someone who came up with the name Mr. X for his other fucking pseudo, like, if you're obfuscating, I could see this being the same guy, but I also, it could just be, it is mundane and bad enough that it could be either real or fake, and I could believe either one equally.
It's speculation, I don't want to call Ed Walters, a liar or anything, but it's I don't know. It makes me wonder a little bit. So on December 27th, there's an 8th UFO sighting at the Walters family household. This time, however, there's no photos taken or humming in anyone's mind. Instead, one of Ed's son's college buddies, Patrick Hanks, is the initial witness. Now, Hanks's experience would not make it to the Sentinel, but MUFON would later interview him at Walter's house. So here is his version of the story. Here's what he says. "One evening, I decided to drop by Ed's because I knew what was going on with the UFOs. I'd known since early on, and I had spent some other nights over here earlier. About a week before that, I spent some time over here. I don't know.
About a week before then?
About a week before that, I spent some time over here. Okay, yeah, that's...
Oh, okay.
I knew what Ed was going through, and I thought I'd drop by and see how he was doing. I arrived at the house about 8:15 in the evening. The door was answered by Ed's wife, and she said, 'It's here,' and she pointed toward the back of the house, and I immediately knew what she was talking about. So I headed through the house toward the back of the house. I got to about the middle of the living room, and I saw the windows of the craft we'd been seeing in the local newspaper all along. I saw through the windows the craft. Sorry, this is written weirdly. So MUFON ends up interviewing him, and they ask him about it. And they ask him, "What did you think the object was when you first noticed it?" And he says, "Well, I knew it was what Ed had been seeing because it was obviously that." And they ask him, "Would you describe what you saw in as much detail as possible?" And here's what he says. "Okay, a craft about 20 feet, or what we thought at the time was about 20 feet wide. Straight edges, power source coming out of the bottom, light on top. It was the one we'd been seeing. It wasn't real bright. It wasn't very, very glowing or anything. I mean, not to the point where it would probably take up everybody in the world if they'd seen it, or wake up everybody in the world. It wasn't as bright as daylight, but it was bright, it was glowing, it was hovering, and as Ed came in, it moved a little bit toward the southeast and then blinked out. It was gone." And they have him recount it again, and ask about, like, how it just blinked out of existence. And they ask him, had Ed taken a picture before or after? And he's like, "You mean of this incident?" And they say, "Yes, They say yes. And he goes on to say no because he had been out at the pool. He was coming in to get the camera. When he saw me, it left. We assumed that maybe they knew I was here through Ed. And so, of course, MUFON's like, can you elaborate on how it would know you're there through Ed? And he responds, because they supposedly had the ability to sense through Ed the things that are going on around him. They knew what Ed's thoughts are, feelings are, I guess, and so he just assumed that, because the instant Ed turned the corner and saw me, it just left. And so he just sort of jumped to a conclusion through that. They ask him, what do you think the UFOs could be? And he says, they could be anything. I mean, they could be government, they could be us, they could be the Soviets, but I doubt it. I think they're probably alien life from other planets. And they ask him some normal stuff like, have you ever seen a UFO before? How much did you know about this, this phenomenon? And he's like, no, didn't know about it, blah, blah, blah. And Ed kind of has his little commentary on this particular situation. He says the UFO had allowed Francis to see it. Now, for some reason, maybe on accident, Patrick had seen it. Does the UFO know when I am alone, or can it somehow read my mind? Does it know when others are watching? Did the UFO allow Patrick to see it? As Patrick said, it was about 8:15 p.m. and I had stepped onto the back to drain some water from the pool. There had been a lot of rain over the holidays, and the water level was above the pool skimmer. When I leaned over to change the valve setting, I began to hear the hum. I stood up and quickly called to Frances without yelling. I wasn't sure if she heard me or not. In the darkness, I scanned the sky, and there it was, low to the ground, maybe 20 feet high and very close to the tree line at the high school. It was only slightly glowing except for the bottom power source, which was very bright. My eyes were fixed on the UFO for only a few seconds. I called for Frances again as I went for the back door about 20 feet away. On into the house, and I saw that the kitchen was empty. I was going for my camera. As I rounded the corner into the living room, I almost walked into Patrick, who had just turned from looking out the living room window. I saw it, Patrick whispered, with a lot of air hissing with his words.
So how does he know the thing on the bottom is the power source?
I think that's their guess,
Okay. Because, I don't know. Those things always stick out to me where there's where they slip something in very innocuously that is, they would have no way of knowing for sure. It always just sticks out to me. But so now we have the friend seeing it. We have more people getting involved. This is becoming more, I don't know. Is this person Patrick? Is he interviewed anywhere? Or do we have anything on him?
Just the MUFON interview.
Okay.
Where because he doesn't report his sighting, but at some point it's made known to MUFON that he had seen the UFO one of these days. That's as far as I know. Okay. On the very next evening on December 28th, around 8 p.m., the Walters household would have their 9th UFO sighting. Ed is in his back.
When you say it like that, it does sound kind of silly. They're about to have it's like saying lightning struck a bunch of times. I know that UFOs will come to the same place and stuff, and but having 9 UFO sightings over the course of a month or however long this has been,
it's a lot.
Is a lot.
Yeah. Well, Ed's in his bedroom and he's taking notes in a log when he notices movement outside the window. And notably, this UFO visit once again did not signal its arrival with the buzzing in Ed's head. Ed also notes that he's pretty sure these things can go invisible, seemingly at will. And this sighting is mostly typical, especially with this, what seems to be this new orange glowing UFO. It has this pale orange glow. However, a few things of note do happen. For one, Francis this time suggests to Ed that he calls the police. And at the mention of this, Ed says that the UFO blinks out of existence. And
all right, so they don't UFOs say a cab, all right.
Yeah. Well, this is his whole thing is he speculates that the thing could read their thoughts, or at least his thoughts somehow, because as soon as this idea of calling the police is communicated to him, that's when it blinks out of existence.
All right.
And another thing of note, it gets very close in this encounter, and this time Ed has a video camera on him.
Interesting.
So here's what he says happened. The pool is terraced with large landscaping timbers, and I scaled them one at a time, never taking my eyes off the sky. So he's out back, going up this thing, trying to get closer to it to get a video of it. When I reached the next elevation, the UFO came into view off to my right, very clear to my naked eye, but much less so through the viewfinder of the video camera. Again, its body was orange-colored with a white top and brighter orange bottom power source. I stood up behind a thick hedge and started filming. The UFO must have been over 300 feet away and maybe 100 feet high. The distances are so hard to determine when you don't know the size of what you're looking at. It seemed to rotate slowly and also would waffle back and forth as it traveled from south to north, my right to left. It would stop for a moment, briefly retrace its own airspace, and then continue on to the north. Following it with the camera was not too hard, but there were a lot of branches and trees between me and the UFO. They were obstructing the view, so I stepped up to the next terrace level while I was filming. The night was quiet, with only the sound of a distant train whistle softly pushing its way into the eerie scene of an alien craft silently displaying itself to a man and his camera. I was the man who didn't want this visitor, but who couldn't resist these opportunities to record the visit. The first 50 seconds of the video shows the UFO hesitate and move, until it finally went behind a tree and completely out of my view. Now, the son, Dan, the college-aged son, Dan Walters, and then the younger daughter, Laura, also see this UFO from the porch as Ed scaled the terrace to videotape it. So, like, Ed, in the other side of the story by Francis, Ed's, like, or Dan is, like, trying to get out there to maybe, like, help his dad, but Francis is sort of holding him back, which is what is happening when Ed says this. There was a lot of muted thumping and bumping going on behind me on the porch, but my eyes were fixed on the UFO. It looked very different, not physically, but the way it glowed, almost as if it were in a disguise mode. The only parts visible were the bottom power source and the glow of the top light. I filmed it again as it traveled soundlessly. It never seemed to move closer to me, nor did it seem to move farther away. Only a parallel path that somebody might easily overlook or dismiss as an unimportant light in the sky. Seeing it travel in this fashion made it easy for me to understand with the ease with which it could move about unnoticed. As the UFO crossed directly in front of my line of sight, still more than 300 feet away, it hesitated, then retraced its path. Then, with no noticeable change, it winked out. This complete sighting, as I've written it, is recorded on the videotape. I've made the 1 minute 38 second video available to the media, and it has been studied by experts. My thoughts are that this videotaped sighting could be the most important proof. I actually have not seen this video yet, but we'll come back to it eventually.
Okay, so this does exist. It's out there?
I believe so. Yes. So now it's January 1988. We've moved on. They've had the new year. Christmas is come and gone. All the festivities are done with. And Ed decides that he is now obligated to tell his full story. He says that this decision came as his story proliferated, often misquoted and filled with inaccuracies. I guess one story, even like an article somewhere, claims that he had an alien implant chip in his head, which, he of course says did not happen. And he also now sees coming out with the story as a sort of quote.
I know a foot doctor that he should see if he's got an alien implant.
Oh yeah, that's right. The podiatrist who also is an alien slayer, alien implant surgeon.
Yeah.
God, that's such a wild story. He also now, I guess, sees coming out with the story as a sort of quote unquote insurance policy. He's fearing that there may be something to the message from the UFO visitors about his being in danger, which they've said to him before in his head. Now, the MUFON investigators had agreed to withhold Ed's name and in exchange, he gives them the full story and full cooperation in the investigation. So now MUFON is now aware by like mid-January that Ed Walters, the Mr. X sightings, all this stuff, they know now that he is like experiencing all this crazy shit. He tells them about the humming in his head, all of that.
Okay. So he's fully out in the open with them now.
With them,
not necessarily with the entire world, but with MUFON specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe Dwayne Cook at the Sentinel knows, but they haven't published his name anywhere, and they've agreed not to let him stay anonymous at this point. So Then on January 12th in the evening, Ed has his 10th encounter.
Does he get a free one now? Like,
yeah. The punch card's been filled up, and he's going to get one completely neutral UFO encounter. No humming, no blue beams or anything. No, just kidding. They're gonna fuck him up. So driving down the highway on his way back to check on something that he had left at his work site, there's a sudden brilliant white flash that causes Ed's arms to go numb, which is bad for when you're driving, right? Like,
yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, he can't really steer his car properly, and he's like trying to pull a maneuver to, like, you know, turn himself around and safely, like, stop moving the car, but he ends up swerving and going into the grass shoulder, slamming on the brakes. And as he does so, he sees the UFO dart overhead. And this thing stops and hovers about 180 feet away from his car. And here's his account of what went down. Everything was happening very fast, and my first thought was to reverse the truck, but the UFO distracted me as it undulated with a brilliant glow reflecting off the road. It slowly rocked back and forth. One moment the power source was a large oval, then next it was a small slit. My arms were still without feeling. My thoughts were on protecting myself. No way would I go at them peacefully, but what if they shot that white flash straight into the truck? Would it knock me out completely? Would my whole body go numb? For a few seconds I stared at it. No change, it just hovered. I remembered my shotgun behind the seat and tried to reach it with my right hand. No feeling. I reached behind the seat but couldn't feel if I was touching anything. By sliding to the left, opening the door, and then pulling the back of the seat forward, I could visually guide my hand to pick up the shotgun. When I looked back toward the UFO, it had lifted higher and seemed to be moving closer. I leaned across the seat to retrieve the camera, which had rolled over between the passenger seat and the door. By bracing my left arm on the steering wheel, I managed to shoot a photo. I pulled out the film, preparing for another shot, when I noticed that the UFO was definitely moving closer. I panicked, afraid the white flash could hit me in the truck cab. Out of the truck and onto the ground, I pushed myself in a gasping rush.
I do like that this guy saw the choice between grab the gun and grab the camera, and he decided to pick camera for maybe the first time in UFO history and not just start shooting at this thing. Not to
start blasting.
Yeah. So, like, respect to the man. Getting pictures. Now, I will say how, like, I get the impulse to get pictures for all this stuff. Because, like, it's not like he's been, the photos he's put out there have been fully discounted or whatever else. But, like, how long would you, under this situation, keep taking photos of all these things when, like, the world at large doesn't seem to actually care?
Well, when you live,
or is this like a bigger furor in the world than
this is a bigger thing. This is a pretty big thing. Like, I mean, it's not like, you know, the world is abuzz about Ed Walters, and that it's just that it's spread pretty well throughout a lot of Florida, and, you know, even some UFO things across the country are picking up on it. But it's also,
okay, so this has gone out into the world, not just in this little area.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to remember that, like, this is 1988, and it's not like, you know, he had any way of, like, checking, like, oh, sure, this place way over here. He just knows that the local news is talking about it a ton. It's in the papers constantly. Like, that's what he knows. So, whether or not that's his, I mean, his impetus for taking photos just seems to be the classic UFO one, which is like, I have to document this evidence, or else people will not believe me, and it could be just, like, incredibly important to whatever. Like, that seems to be generally his thing. I don't know whether there's, like, this angle where he's like, I need to get the photos so that, like, because he talks about, like I said, like, coming out with the story to him was almost an insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at this point he's suggesting that he's worried something's going to happen to him. So maybe at least he would have evidence that it happened if he keeps taking the photos. He doesn't explicitly say this in the book, but that's kind of almost how I'm reading into it. So I don't know. It's just, it literally, whenever he talks about having to take the photos, he's like, it's like important, you know, it's like we need to document this this phenomenon. So it continues as this thing is, bearing down on him as he's sort of, hiding in the back of his truck. So he says, I was scared and my chest heaved as I hyperventilated. I was trying to crawl under the truck. The camera was slung on my left wrist and I dragged the shotgun with my right hand. When I looked forward down the road, the UFO wasn't there. I was halfway under the truck when it hit again. Flash, my legs stung and went numb from the knees down. I dug into the grass with my elbows and finally managed to make it to where my head was below the oil pan. Again, looking forward, I saw the UFO hovering once more above the road. I tried to get the camera lined up on the UFO, but the truck was too low to allow my elbows enough room to hold the camera upright. I took another shot and saw the UFO slowly begin to rotate. Then came the hum, really loud. A voice. You are in danger. We will not harm you. Come forward. As I think back now, I remember that these instructions made no sense. You are in danger? Come forward? No way. They were going to have to drag me out from under the truck. A blue beam flashed from the UFO to the road. 5 times it shot down. Each blue beam deposited a creature on the road close to the UFO. I began to yell obscenities. I wasn't yelling at them or at myself, but just out of shock. Each time a creature was left standing there, I yelled. Each one stood waiting and was joined by the next. Finally, all 5 began to move in lockstep toward me. Each one had a silver rod. They moved the rods up and down in their right hands as they marched down the middle of the road. They were 200 feet from me, and I knew I could not stay under the truck. I started blacking out, thinking that the creatures would be on me at any moment. When I stumbled into the driver's seat, they were about halfway from the UFO. They didn't seem in a big hurry, but I was. I threw the truck into reverse and backed across the road. Finally, without looking back, I fled. My arms and legs were still dangerously numb, and driving was almost impossible. When I reached the main highway with all its traffic, I pulled over and rubbed some life back into my arms.
Okay. So they have a paralyzing beam that they can just take out body parts whenever they want.
Yeah, it's funny. So like the blue beam almost seems to be there, like freeze you in place and maybe suck you up into the UFO beam, and then the white beam is like a flash that like paralyzes the parts that it hits, which is a very weird idea to me because in my experience reading about UFOs, it's like usually the beam, anything it encompasses is just trapped within it. It's never like, oh, pick a body part, like this is a new way to look at it for me.
It's a very specific beam. Like it's one of those things where it almost, if you don't describe it as a beam, it sounds more reasonable for alien encounter stuff. Like if it's just like, oh, they have like they have like, they mentally can just make your arms unable to move. But the fact that there's like the fact that they require you to aim it is the thing that makes it weird to me for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, there's a lot of very weird specific descriptions and details of this UFO. So
yeah.
The next day after this encounter in the truck, while Ed is still recovering from the bizarre tingling sensation inflicted on him by the UFO, he gets a surprise visit at his home from 2 men claiming to be agents for the Air Force Special Security Services.
Interesting.
Ed recalls the first agent introducing themselves as McCarthy, but can't remember the second agent's name. And they begin the conversation by saying, quote, "We know you have some photos of a UFO. This is a material seizure warrant to confiscate the photographs and negatives." I found that pretty interesting that the special agents are just like, we're here for UFO stuff, instead of just being like, we want your photos and you know which ones we're talking about. Because, again, it's a little weird and off-brand to me that special agents from the military would explicitly denote that the UFOs are the things they're interested in.
Yeah. They usually try not to mention UFOs at all.
Yeah.
and just...
It's always like, you know what you saw, but you need to pretend you didn't see it and blah, blah, blah. Like, whether it's military or Men in Black, they almost never, like, explicitly say UFO.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but they're there to take his stuff, and Ed, being the hero he is, denies having any photos on his person, which was a lie. And then he tells them another lie and says that all the photographs were now in the hands of the Miami Herald, which, again, the Sentinel has this stuff, not the Miami Herald. The agents then make some threats to the Walters family and tell me better not be lying, and then they just leave. And later that day, Ed revisits the scene where he'd been accosted on the highway, and he meets up with Charles Flanagan from MUFON, and he tells him what went down, shows him the photograph he took during the incident, and even relays his run-in with the agents. And Flanagan's just like, okay, that's wild. I'll look into that.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
4 days later, on January 16th, 1988, Ed has another visitation.
Of course he does.
He recalls discussing the possibility of quote unquote positive contact with Dwayne Cook, where like him and Dwayne Cook from the Sentinel are sort of theorizing on like maybe we can transform these terrifying encounters into more positive ones where we make peaceful, like progressive contact with them. So with this in mind, when Ed hears the humming in his head, he goes only with camera in hand and with no intention of running or hiding. He just thinks to himself, I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to hide. And he goes to find this thing. Francis ends up joining Ed as he walks out in the front yard and stands by his truck, waiting for contact, looking up at the sky. And here's what he says happened. Moments later, I noticed a particular star that gave off a reddish glow. It was different. So much so that I finally realized that it was closer and not a star at all. Immediately, it began to descend. Straight at me, it was falling and growing in size. I could see it clearly, and it was not like the other crafts. Very different, much smaller, and more of a traditional saucer shape. Not at all like the globe-shaped UFOs that appeared in the previous 10 sightings. Another distinct difference was the transparent energy veil that glowed and extended about 4 feet below the circular power source. The hum was still very softly pulsing in my forehead, and as the UFO came directly at me, I flinched and started to duck under the truck. Stopping still, the UFO hovered at about 150 feet overhead. I was startled as the hum suddenly increased. Then, higher than the energy veil UFO, another UFO winked in, giving off a bright white glow from its power source. There was no time to try to think through what was going on. I shot a photo. Within seconds, the energy veil UFO moved off to the east. Then, followed by the bright UFO, both craft raced away and winked out as they reached my vantage point looking through toward the roof line of my house. When I returned to the house, I noticed that the hair on my arms were standing up and crackled when I rubbed them. This lasted less than a minute. This sighting confused me even more. I had been ready to get it over with, but they must have had something else in mind. What was going on? 2 distinctive-looking UFOs had shown themselves to me and then quickly departed. Were there the same creatures in both UFOs? The bright white craft looked similar to the past sightings, but what about this new energy veil UFO? What was it about me that caused these crafts to have such an interest? Again, the questions were growing. More questions and no answers. And always the one I wanted answered most of all, why me?
Yeah. Look, if I had 11 UFO sightings over the course of however long this was, I probably would wonder why me too.
Yeah. So on January 17th, Ed is informed that Walter Andrus, international director of MUFON, had taken a special interest in his case and wanted to meet up with him. They get together. He like travels from Texas, and they make a big deal about, I traveled all this way to come see the special boy. And they get together along with a few other MUFON investigators, and Ed recounts as much as he can to them. They pore over the photographs as well, using like magnifying glasses and stuff. And MUFON agents sort of joke around about maybe spending the night at the Walters house to get a glimpse of the UFO. After a few hours of going over photos and questioning Ed, Andrus leaves, and the next day, the Sentinel puts out a lengthy statement from Andrus regarding his personal investigation in the story, which essentially amounted to, these photos appear genuine, and they show incredible detail, and our anonymous witness doesn't seem to be lying, and it's important that we investigate this for the future of science.
Okay.
So overall, Andrus and MUFON seem pretty ready to believe Ed's story, at least the way he tells it. And they made sure the public knew that they believed as well. So the day after the interview between Ed and Andrus, MUFON investigators Bob Reed and Gary Watson show up to spend the night camping out in front of the house to watch for UFO activity. Ed is given a walkie-talkie to use in case anything happens, and their surveillance of the area would last 9 days in total, with the two working in these 12-hour shifts. And they would swap. They're not like on the property, but they're nearby. And it's January 21st now. In the middle of this surveillance, Ed reluctantly agrees to a half-hour primetime TV documentary spot with the local ABC station, which had been negotiated by Don Ware from MUFON. And then that night at 10:30 p.m., Ed hears the hum in his head again, and he radios Bob on the walkie-talkie as he runs outside. And this is how it went down, according to Ed. He says, "Bob, get your camera. Bob, get your camera. I hear it." And Bob, I guess, is just sort of calm and says, "Okay, I see it." And the hum gets louder in Ed's head, and Ed gets more scared and runs faster, trying to reach the edge of the woods nearby. And he's starting to kind of panic a little bit as he like tries to whisper into the walkie-talkie, but he's panicking, and he says, "You can see it?" And Bob says, "Yeah, but I think it's a plane." And Ed says, "No, this is no plane." And Bob responds, "Yes, it is. It's a plane coming from the west." And Ed basically describes that he can't see the UFO himself, but he knew it was there because he could hear it in his head. And he's running around looking through the trees, and he trips on a chain link fence as he's coming out of this path into a clearing that's near City Hall, which, again, he's like run from his house doing this. And Bob is like insisting, like, "I'm seeing a plane." And Ed's like, at this point, I look up and see a UFO towards the south, and it's high and very bright. And so he yells into the walkie-talkie, "Look to the south. It's next to that brightest star. Look south." Now, of course, he can't see Bob, but Ed says he must have been looking the wrong way. The UFO, I guess, hovered there for a while before it winked out of existence. And the hum gets louder in his head as he hurries around the parking lot area near these apartments where Bob's staked out. And he finally reaches him. And Bob is, he's there recording with a video camera and watching the skies. But Bob says he didn't see the UFO. He only saw an airplane. And he also can't hear the hum that Ed can hear.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look, if this guy's a total liar, he's at least decent at coming up with like somewhat believable reasons why this stuff doesn't, like, there's not more, like he's riding a decent line so far.
Yeah. Well, Bob insists, like I said, that they'd seen an airplane, but Ed is like, "Bob, you were distracted by the airplane. The UFO was visible. It was just the exact opposite direction that you had been looking." And in the book, there's even the full report that was given by Bob, which is mostly dry and technical. Now, one of the things that I kind of wish is that I wish I could tell you, like, I need to check and see if like this report is officially on like a MUFON archive somewhere. I'm curious because I'm not sure if this is, but according to him, this is like an actual copy of the report that this Bob guy put in. Okay. And I think that there's a moment in the report that's interesting because this is how Bob, I guess, noted it down when he sent it to MUFON. Ed almost trotted as he closed the distance. He was wild-eyed and in a state quite different from his usual jocularity. He was swearing oaths and seemed to be sweating despite the chill of the night. He gestured vigorously at a point in the southern sky, diametric from the direction I'd been facing. The object had been up there, next to the brightest star, he said. He pointed at Sirius. It had been within a hand's breadth of Sirius and was of at least equal magnitude. And although it had blinked out before I could locate it, he said that the hum was still in his head. In fact, the hum seemed to be getting louder. "Can't you hear it?" he asked me incredulously. It seemed to him it should have been waking up everybody in the whole Sailwind complex. That's the apartment complex they're near.
Apartments? Okay.
Ed was sure the craft was still in the area and still posed a threat to his person. I mentioned for him to get into my van as the side door was wide open. He didn't hesitate. And that's the end of the stakeout story. I kept the video going a while longer just in case, but of course nothing materialized. The hum started to diminish almost immediately and soon was totally gone. Just as quickly, Ed's strange sense of agitation dissipated and his humor returned. Within 15 minutes, he was almost back to normal. Another quarter hour of small talk and he was ready to trek back over to his house. I was slower in recovering from the effects of what I'd witnessed than he apparently was. I was really concerned. Didn't he think it would be best if I gave him a ride? Wasn't he afraid the craft would come after him again on the return trip? No, he didn't think there would be any problem, and anyhow we had radio contact. I'll give you a call when I get there, he promised. With that, Ed struck out for home. 8 or 10 minutes later, he called me from his front doorway to wish me good night. Good night, my man, I replied. True story, folks, about one of the bravest men in the world today. It would be easy to imagine that the dramatic transformation Ed underwent that January night was just that, imagination. I think maybe I wish it were, but the video record proves otherwise. Ed's torment in the Sandwind parking lot was the real thing, just as real as are his photographs and his graphic descriptions of the aliens and their incredible capabilities. It's time the world started taking these things seriously. So there goes the bravest man anybody at MUFON's ever met.
Yeah. All right. Good for him.
Yeah. Over the next couple days, nothing especially eventful happens. Ed claims that on the 22nd, air traffic was surprisingly heavy in the area. Furthermore, as the MUFON investigation went on, a mysterious military helicopter did a few circles around the Walters' house. The next day, on January 23rd, the Pensacola News-Journal prints a photograph of a so-called mysterious blimp that would later be revealed to be a research blimp tethered to an anchored ship in Pensacola Bay, manned by the good folks at Eglin Air Force Base. Ed claims that this blimp would move locations based on where UFO sightings were happening. I don't know how he knows that, but that's what he says in the book. He also brings up a sighting reported to the Sentinel on the same night that the military helicopter swept his home, which to him corroborates one of his theories, which is that the military was also trying to track down these UFOs, and he also suggests that one of the reasons MUFON may not have gotten much evidence during this time in the investigation was because the military had scared the UFOs off with their presence.
Yeah, okay. Military. It's interesting that the military gets used both as an incentive for aliens to come here and also a thing that scares them off in a way, you know?
Yeah.
Like as needed for the story, they either attract or push away UFOs.
Yeah, it just depends on, the type of UFO and the kind of yarn you're trying to spin.
Yeah.
So on January 24th, Ed has his 13th encounter with the UFO. He gets the humming in all its intensity in his head and tries to radio for the MUFON investigators, but is only met with static. And Ed, the way it's written, Ed makes it sound like this starts to go down during like a part of the investigator's schedule where they're repositioning and he can't reach them. So like they're not there for him to physically go to, and apparently he can't contact them on the walkie-talkies. So instead, Ed grabs his Polaroid and video cameras and drives to the Sentinel office to meet with Dwayne Cook, the editor. And after explaining the situation, Dwayne joins Ed in his truck as they drive back down the highway with the hum pounding in Ed's brain. It's raining and overcast with low visibility, which Dwayne even mentions as they drive. Like Dwayne makes this comment of weird that the UFO chose the especially rainy day for this. And
it is weird.
I'm going to tell you this next account, this 13th encounter. And Niall, we're gonna cap this episode there before we go
and do part four.
So
I love when you go into a recording in the first episode of this, and it's like, oh, it's a two-parter. Maybe
I'm always wrong. I'm always wrong, and this is the most. This is the most UFO encounter documentation I've ever seen about any case. Like, usually these cases are just this one done thing. It would be like the equivalent of like running through all the details of like every single encounter and interaction George Adamski had or whatever. Like it's a lot. And
damn. All right.
I feel like because the stories and the narrative sort of evolves, it would be unfair to not tell you all the encounters. Now we're approaching the end of things.
Yes.
But nonetheless, these encounters have weirder and weirder details put into them. And then there's going to be some twists and turns in part 4 where we actually that actually should be the last episode. So
I'm not going to let you. If you tell me in the middle of the next episode that we need a part 5, I'm just going to say no, and you're going to finish the episode.
Okay.
And
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So here's Ed's account of what went down as he drove with Dwayne from the Sentinel. I didn't care about the weather. Not only could I hear the hum, but I could feel the UFO's presence. I kept insisting, Dwayne, it's here. That SOB is here. The UFO was somehow pulling on my forehead, fading in and out. I tried to explain the feeling to Dwayne, but could only insist that the UFO was near. Then the pressure increased, and the UFO voice said, in sleep, you know. I was scared and yelled out loud, oh, damn, it just said something. Oh, damn, it's here, I repeated out loud. It just said, in sleep, you know, in sleep, you know. Dwayne continued to videotape and had started to say something when the hum dug deep into my skull. I yelled and pleaded for this thing to get out of my life. My head, my mouth, my face were tingling. Oh, damn, I don't know if I can drive. Dwayne, does it look like... Does my face look like it's moving? Is my face moving? Dwayne answered, no, it's all right. It's still. Does it feel like your skin is crawling? No, it's okay. You're looking good. We continued to drive, and I had to make myself stop looking up and out the side windows and watch the road instead. It felt like the UFO was right on top of the truck and was reaching into the cab, ready to pull me from the wheel. My right eye began to press outward. Is my eye moving? I leaned over to look in the rearview mirror. Dwayne answered as he tried to look into my face. No, I don't think so. But I could feel something. My right eye felt like it was coming out of its socket, and the hum grew stronger. Dwayne was staring at my face and tried to reassure me, his voice, as always, calm and steady. You're okay. Your eye is stable. A rush of speed swept through my body. I looked at the road and thought we were speeding out of control. Dwayne, are we going too fast? He quickly replied, No, you're doing just fine. The hum decreased, but my face still throbbed. I was afraid. These sensations had never happened before during any of the other incidents. There was a twisting pull that reached from my forehead through my neck and down into my stomach. They kind of deliberate over whether they need to just give up the search for the UFO on the road. But Dwayne wants to keep going. And Dwayne asks Ed about the voice that's in his head. And here's what Ed says. It was just like a knife sticking in my brain, I told him. I felt if there was to be any chance of seeing the UFO, we had to get off the main highway. Dwayne was quick to suggest Soundside Drive, but I wanted no part of going someplace that deserted. Plus, I had already seen what had happened on Soundside Drive when the UFO lowered the 5 creatures. I wanted this trauma over, but not like that. The hum began to press harder again. I wondered out loud if the UFO knew that Dwayne was with me. If it's reading your mind, it does, but as long as it knows I'm not a threat, that's what it needs to learn. My stomach nodded, and I started to talk out loud to the UFO. Maybe I could explain that I needed Dwayne to help me. I needed Dwayne to film what was happening. As I spoke, a pain shot from my head to my stomach, and I almost vomited. The rain had slackened, and Dwayne suggests that we turn off the highway on any one of the roads that led toward the country club golf course, which is off to our right. As we approached a turn-off road, I noticed my face was numb. I don't like this, I said. I had to force myself to continue driving. We continued to drive along, and I was afraid for Dwayne. I had known I was in trouble, but now I had involved him in my dangerous confrontation. I told him my fears. This was a bad idea, Dwayne. You might be in trouble too. Maybe we should take you back. This is bad. If you think I'm in trouble, then find a place to park. You can stay in the truck and I'll go to a distance and tape and watch, or else I'll stay in the truck and you go. I don't think I'm in trouble. I could still feel it close by and urged Dwayne to keep looking. I was looking for a place to stop. Suddenly, my heart raced and I knew something was going to happen. I eased the truck over to the side of the road at the same time calling out, if you're going to do it, come on. Okay, come on. The hum grew louder, and I warned Dwayne once again that he might be in trouble. Then I stepped out of the truck. I was in the middle of the road. I was exposed. Dwayne got out also, still filming me, but stayed close to the truck as I paced back and forth across the road. Okay, I'm ready. Here I am. Again, I called to Dwayne to be careful, and he responded, don't worry about me. My stomach cramped, and I yelled, fuck this. I want it out of my life. Dwayne, they're here. Come on, SOB, let's do it. My left hand burst with pain. Then a crushing pain rushed from my right forehead across my chest and down my left arm and leg. I was driven to the ground and screamed to Dwayne, they're here, Dwayne, they're here. They were using my...
Okay. This guy's like... This sounds like something on Star Trek, or where all of a sudden someone has like a little laser thing that just makes someone's like all their nerve endings start firing or what, like that kind of thing.
It's fucking crazy, and somehow only Ed is experiencing and seeing anything. They were using my own nervous system to hurt me. I screamed again, wanting them to do whatever they had come for. I'm not going to do this again. This is it. I'm not going out like this anymore. You better do it. I'm not going to do this again. Come on, SOB. The hum eased and in a moment stopped. I was still standing in the road. The misty rain wet me, causing me to shiver. I walked back to the truck. Dwayne had already climbed back in because it was beginning to rain a little harder. When I opened the door, I could see he was still filming. I was disappointed that we hadn't filmed the UFO, but maybe the torment and that strong surge of pain had ended the hum. Maybe the connection was broken. I glanced up across the sky and announced that I would not be back. Suddenly, about 200 feet behind me, Dwayne, and maybe 6 feet high, the UFO winked into view. I yelled, "Oh fuck, oh shit, there it is." I jerked the camera up to my face, but I didn't line up the viewfinder on the UFO. I never saw the UFO through the camera. I just aimed in the general direction and hit the trigger. The flash went off for the photo. When I lowered the camera, there was nothing in the sky. The UFO was gone. So Ed claims that in this moment he was outraged and found it unbelievable that the UFO wouldn't allow Dwayne to see it. Even though they traveled all this way and went through so much, the UFO refused to let Dwayne see it.
Yeah, it's really mean of this UFO.
Unbelievable.
Just
rude, frankly.
Not let him capture it in fun.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's going to bug him every like 3 days, you got to at least get in the photo.
Absolutely. Now, as Ed runs around yelling and cursing out the UFO, Dwayne calls him over to check the photo that Ed had just taken in the Polaroid. And here's a little twist to get us ready for episode 4.
Okay.
Sure enough, coming out of the Polaroid camera is a photo, clear as day, of the UFO. Dwayne watched Ed shoot that picture, and while he didn't get any evidence himself with the video camera, Ed was once again able to capture the UFO clearly.
Interesting. What is this guy preloading his fucking camera with like fake UFO shots? Like, what the fuck is going on? All right, or does he have a special filter that lets him see it? I don't know.
Hard to say.
Got, fucking.
We'll be digging into in episode 4, like what the counter theories are suggesting about his photos and things like this, but. This is a pretty wild thing from Ed's accounting of it. Ed's recounting, I should say.
Yeah.
And also, we'll get into this next time as well. The video that Dwayne is filming as Ed is basically freaking out at nothing, that exists. You can't watch it, but it exists. It's out there, and I don't know... We'll get into that.
Okay.
So, Niall.
Yes.
Are you ready for the big question?
Oh, always.
My big question to you this week is, which superpower would you rather have? The ability to capture clear photos of UFOs, clear photos of cryptids, or clear photos of the paranormal?
Okay.
I know what one I would choose.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to guess. Are you ghosts? Do you want to be able to capture clear photos of ghosts?
If ghosts, I'm somewhere between ghosts and cryptids, because UFOs, cat's out of the fucking bag already. Everybody's already got photos. We've got fucking alien bodies on TV. Everybody knows now.
Yeah,
it's passé at this point. So I think if I could capture evidence, like just undeniable evidence of a ghost, like hanging out, maybe doing ghost stuff, maybe, coming out of a mirror or something, that would be amazing. But frankly, I'm leaning towards cryptids. Imagine if you could have a Patterson-Gimlin scenario, but capture a photo of Bigfoot that was clear as day instead of blurry as fuck. Think about that.
That would be really cool. Like that was kind of how I was leaning was the cryptid, just because I think like you're dealing more with straight up just like nature photography, which is fun. And B, cryptids are like the thing that I would be, I think if any one of these three things were confirmed to be true, I think cryptids would be the one that I would be most like psyched about, you know? And that's kind of a weird thing to try to think about, because like the concept of like aliens and stuff, it would fundamentally shift your perception of the universe in a way that cryptids may not. But I think cryptids are the ones that I would just be most just like psyched that Mothman exists,
the paranormal would be the same way, where like you'd have to just fundamentally change your understanding of reality. Like you'd have to be like, I guess God exists or something, and the afterlife is real. If the way that we find out the soul exists is because we realize that ghosts are real, and that just like convert, like if that's how it works, that would be the fucking weirdest. Like, and it's a pretty weird, it's a weird scenario. And I do think the existence of the soul presupposes the existence of God. So it's all out there now.
So maybe cryptids is the least like
mind blowing,
devastating mind to your mind,
still important,
and like your conception of the universe, while still being cool as shit. So that's just like the safe one to go with for like my psychological state.
Yeah,
you know?
That for psychological state, I guess we're both choosing cryptids because the other two, the implications are insane.
Yeah, I would like something that is just like really cool by itself, not something that fundamentally
warps your worldview.
You know,
just completely brings it all down. I mean, if you can prove that ghosts exist and therefore souls exist and therefore God exists, that's basically the end of the world, right? Like, I think that
like you would probably get murdered instantly by somebody if you went out and had confirmation of that.
There's a whole, I could think of just off the top of my head, like a couple organizations or people that would want to kill me after that. Well, all right. Then we answered the question. Safe bet is cryptids.
It's rare that the big question we find like we come to like
shaking hands,
an actual answer and not just the fun bit. Mm-hmm. But I think this is the most concrete answer that we've gotten in a big question.
Well, that's amazing, because there's not been any concrete answers with this story yet. So
no,
we'll get back to it in part 4, the actual swear to God final part. Anything else now before we take care of some business?
No, I think let's just get into it. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
Yeah, as long as that is a platform that exists.
Yeah, we got to get first me a Blue Sky account, and then also
get the hell out of there. You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorites podcatchers, from Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. I stream on there sometimes. Things have been kind of crazy. One of my streaming partners, who you all might know from the show, Colin, had a baby recently, so congratulations to him.
Congratulations, Colin.
We love Colin, and we love their budding family. But he's been busy, and I've been busy. It's been tough. But please follow us on Twitch, because we do stream. I'm going to try and make that a more regular thing soon, a more scheduled thing. Email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Do you have stories of the paranormal, of UFOs? Anything strange that you can tell us about? We'll read your email on the show if it's a good one. We're getting a lot of spammy emails of people in the world of weird being like, please have me on your show so I can promote my book. And we're sick and tired of that shit. They don't listen to the show. You listen to the show, and we want to hear your stories. So please email us. Patreon.com/ItGetsWeird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, we have a show called It Gets Weird TV, where right now we're discussing The X-Files, Season 1. We're about to wrap that up, and then when we wrap up a show, patron donors get to vote on what the next show we're going to watch is, and it's always something weird related to conspiracies, the paranormal, UFOs, stuff like that. We also have a $5 tier where you get a bonus show in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV, so you're getting bonus content every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday, and you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out, chatting about all kinds of stuff, and yes, that includes UFOs, cryptids, and the paranormal. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it. You're just kind of kicking us a tip saying, hey, I like your show. Here's $1 a month. Thanks for doing what you do. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird podcast.
Thank you all for listening and supporting the show. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.